moment to think about these questions. Do you agree that most mental illness, including depression, can be treated and people can often get better and live normal lives? What can the media do to give a more accurate picture of individuals experiencing mental health challenges? The BBC made a show called Prescription for Murder in 2017. It said that people don't do violent things because they are depressed or have other mental health illnesses, but because they are given antidepressants. There is absolutely no evidence to show that this is true. Antidepressants are used worldwide, so side effects or adverse reactions do not cause murderous anger or violent crimes. People with depression who are treated are less likely to kill themselves than people with depression who are not treated at all. Research has shown that images in the media that discourage or delay treatment are more likely to hurt people than help them. This study, Trends in News Media Coverage of Mental Illness in the United States, 1995-2014 by Emma McGinty et al. Looked at 400 news stories about mental illness from TV and newspapers. The researchers found that these patterns haven't changed in the last 20 years. More and more recent depictions have been negative, which could make mental illness look even worse. Sadly, as the authors point out, this can make a patient less likely to go to a doctor or keep going to a therapy if they are already diagnosed. This study also found that media often portray mental illness as something that can't be helped. Only 47% of the stories talked about treatment, and 14% said anything about the treatment that worked or about recovery. People with mental illness may seem like they can't live normal, useful lives. But this is not the case. Most people get better, usually with help from treatment, medicine, their family, and friends. Here are some recent examples of bad reporting from the top news stories in India. The Indian Express wrote on February 3, 2021, man with paranoid schizophrenia held for killing his 65-year-old father in Jogeshwari. On Feb 16, 2021, the same news source said parents killed daughters in Andhra town. The accused couple may have shared delusion disorder. The headline almost makes it sound like people with mental illness do bad things. Mental illness is often discovered in the media and conclusions are often made before the facts are known. Do you agree with this statement? Violent criminals have had a mental disorder at some point. Studies often find that print and broadcast media make mental illness seem more dramatic, distorted, and damaging than it is. It portrays violence, criminality, and unpredictability. It also shows negative responses to the mentally ill, such as fear, rejection, scorn, and mockery. People with mental health problems are shown in the media as violent or as criminals a lot of the time. A poll in the UK found that more than 3 out of every 10 people thought that people with mental illness were more violent, even though they are much more likely to be victims of crime than the ones who commit it. This briefing should not be taken to mean that there is no link between mental illness and crime or violence. It's too complex to deal with. Some things that affect a person's mental health and well-being throughout life are their early childhood experiences, being poor, facing physical hardships, their upbringing, and genetic makeup. For example, violence is much more likely to happen when someone is using drugs than they are depressed. Unfortunately, drug addiction can also cause mental illness. People with depression or anxiety can use illicit substances to relieve their symptoms and feel better. How all of this fits together is a complex and sophisticated mechanism. Journalism about mental health is no different from other kinds of journalism. It all comes down to finding engaging and diverse contributors who will bring in something creative to the narrative. Giving your audience a look at different ways people have dealt with mental health is not about following rules and checking things off a list. It's about being open to everyone. It's key to public health. Contemplate this question. Do you think journalists are persuaded to use sensational media in their reporting? Like many other countries, the media industry has a high turnover rate. Many frontline journalists are recent college graduates who have to balance social obligations and market competition. Research suggests that work ethics and professionalism go against what young and inexperienced journalists think and believe, even though there is a sense of commitment to improving the society's media. They have a very low opinion of their ability to influence the vulnerable people. Junior journalists can't always refuse to do something that a more experienced team member has given them. You feel like you should do what your editor tells you to do, but your editor thinks you should say what your moral limits are. Before starting, you must decide what kind of a journalist you want to be. Regarding mental health issues, you have the right to speak up for your interviewees and refuse to talk about things that make you or make them uncomfortable. For example, as a news reporter, you might have to go to the homes of grieving families of those who have died by suicide to see the situation for yourself. If the family says no the first time, your lead can tell you to try again. You can either refuse to come back or, in the meantime, set some quiet limits around your personal space. It's not a reason to feel bad because those families need your kindness. Partner-style engagement can help the media and families of people who have died by suicide positively talk to each other. Encourage people to talk about their stories of healing and hope. Expert-led interviews often use jargon that may not help the information to the people who need to hear the most. Amplify voices. Talk to people with life experiences, suicide survivors, and suicide loss survivors. Make a place for personal stories that don't rely on sensationalism. Tell your stories in a direct and honest way. Once you know that your source is willing to be interviewed, how you do it in a way that shows respect and is professional. It's not hard at all. Reach out to them with compassion. Give them time and listen to what they have to say. People who want to tell their most personal stories are a great honor, and you should go into it with an open mind. Let them feel at ease while still respecting their limits. Depending on where you work, you may or may not have time to read the draft with the sources. But when reporting on mental health, it is important to think about how you can be honest with your sources about how will you show them. When the article comes out, they should read it and be happy with how you have told their story. Section 24 of Mental Health Care Act of 2017 sets rules on how media can report information about mental illness. It is important to remember not to publish pictures or other information about someone who is getting help at a mental health facility without their permission. When writing an article about any mental illness, it's just as important to know how to provide referral support as it is to report responsibly. You should tell people where they can get help at the end. Make it a point to be clear. It makes your reporting more empathic, a very important trait for a good mental health reporter. Implementing media reporting guidelines effectively is challenging. In most countries, reporters can choose whether or not to follow the criteria. Due to the voluntary nature of the standards, lack of legal force, self-regulation is the way forward. The Swiss Press Council, a self-regulatory group in charge of journalistic ethics and standards, take complaints about Swiss newspapers. Reporters can influence the public's perceptions because their words have major impact. With power comes responsibility. In the last and concluding module, we will talk about how reporters for the media are indeed more than just reporters. They are also media influencers.